Well, welcome again to this continuation of the series on St. Francis and Franciscan spirituality. It's Friday, the 17th, and today I'm talking about one of the next key aspect of Franciscan theology, spirituality, which is conversion, or as Brother Ramon would say, evangelical conversion. And we'll get on to why he uses those terms and not, which doesn't necessarily correlate with what some in the church might understand as evangelical or evangelicalism. But this idea of conversion, of quite a dramatic conversion, as we see in the life of St. Francis and many of the Franciscans that we know about afterwards, whereas there's almost this Damascus Road conversion experience, where suddenly it seems like the lights are turned on. However, what we do notice, as I said yesterday, through sorrow and disillusionment, there's often a lot of inner preparation before this seemingly a sudden conversion experience happens, and I can attest that to my own life. You sort of go through life, and then some of the things that are working within you, the entering into the suffering and entering into those periods of disillusionment, from going from order into disorder. Then you get the suddenness into the reorder, this conversion experience. And it's profound, and it's not something that then, for the Franciscan spirituality, and for most actually, there's this conversion experience. And it's not a once-off thing. It's something that then leads to a constant conversion. Each day we are being converted or transformed. And obviously what we're being transformed into is a greater likeness of Christ, so that our lives match closer and closer to the life of Christ. And it's interesting, so that, like I said, several different spiritual practices, such as the Benedictines, had this conversion experience. And one of the great mystical teachers, Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist, said this about conversion: ultimately, this is nothing more and nothing less than a commitment to Christ's call to follow him, whatever that may mean. What is certain is that it will involve dying, and not only death at the end of the journey, but lesser deaths in life, the dying to live, the loss that will bring new growth. A bit like when Jesus said, unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it can't bring forward all that fruit, all the new life. So this conversion, this transformation, will often mean that we will need to let things die throughout our life, these little things within us that prevent us from producing the fruit that Christ calls us to. It's lifelong, and it's, as Brother Ramon says, it's basically a lifelong journey in the transforming school of Christ. And the reason that Brother Ramon calls it an evangelical conversion is that it's deeply rooted in the Gospels. A bit like when I said in the first session, Franciscan spirituality is deeply rooted in Christ. It's Christological. Our conversion experience is based on the life of Christ. It's rooted in the Gospels. Come to me, says Jesus, and I will give you rest. Come to me, my burden is light. Take on my yoke upon your shoulders, and you will find rest. That's what we're being invited into. That's the evangelical nature of this. It's an evangelical conversion, because it does require a personal aspect. So it's a personal confession of sin. It's a commitment to being a disciple of Christ. And it's a personal and intimate fellowship with Christ that we're being called into. So the evangelical aspect is the personal, yet it's also Catholic, which means it's corporate. It's bigger than just us. It involves the whole. It implies perseverance and continuity of discipline and discipleship and growth, maturity, and leading ultimately to perfect union with Christ, with God in love. That's the ultimate aim of the journey. And it's an invitation to take it there. Now, other spiritual disciplines, like the Jesuits and even the Benedictines, tend to systematize some of these things, but that's not the Franciscan way. The way into this conversion and the way we live out that conversion in our daily lives after that initial sudden sort of rapturous sort of conversion where you suddenly realize who you are in Christ. It's a conversion when you suddenly realize what it means to be forgiven, what it means to be completely loved. Unfortunately, many people who profess a faith in Christ haven't always found that, which is a really sad side of things. But this is an invitation into that. Many people who have attended churches all their lives haven't necessarily had an inner conversion experience, even though they may profess a Christian faith, and God honors that. They're not outside the faith. But he calls us and invites us on into something bigger, which is that conversion experience. Because once you know yourself fully forgiven and fully loved, it frees you to do so much because you don't have to fear anything. Even if the ultimate end comes and you're doing something that ultimately causes your death, your physical death on this planet, we know that is nothing to fear. Christ went through it and came out the other side. He invites us to follow him even into the potential of death without fear, in complete trust that God has got our good. And that's the conversion experience we're being asked to enter into. And many live their Christian lives without really fully realizing that until obviously they come to meet Christ at the end of their life. And they are still in the fold, obviously. But unlike the Benedictines and the Jesuits and some of these others, we didn't systematize this conversion experience. The conversion and how we live out the conversion and transformational life is different for every Franciscan, as really it is for everyone. So we don't ask them to follow a set of principles and a set of rules. Do this, and then you'll get this conversion experience. No. Francis lived a life. He didn't live a system. He didn't set up a system, and he calls us to live a life. As a Franciscan, my Franciscan journey, spiritual journey, isn't going to look the same as St. Francis's. However, it will have a family resemblance. There are some deep principles which we've been talking about this week of Franciscan spirituality. So I will have a Franciscan family resemblance, even though my living out my life and my conversion and my transformation each day into the ultimate fellowship, with Christ, that ultimate perfection, which is being in Christ, will look different along the way. That perfect union of being hidden with Christ in God, as Paul says, is the aim at the end. Well, and we are in that already. And really what Franciscan conversion, the conversion in a Franciscan spirituality point of view is less about, it's about living into what we already are. We are already hidden with Christ in God, and we already have access to this perfect union through Christ, but we put roadblocks in the way. Our conversion experience, our transformation that we're being called into, which Francis showed us some principles with which to live by in order to get that way, get to there, is really getting rid of the roadblocks so we can see and start to live into what we are already in Christ, that we are already in perfect union. We just put things in the way. I hope this helps. I'll speak to you again tomorrow.